This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Finding Sodom. That's straight ahead this week on A View from the Bunker. You have blessed us with your support during our first year in ministry. You literally make it possible for us to do what we do. And so as we prepare to head into a new year, we want to return the blessing to you. Through January, we've prepared a number of special offers at the Gilbert House store, and we're featuring the Red Wing Saga, Sharon's wonderful series of supernatural thrillers that teaches spiritual warfare through masterful storytelling with fascinating historical mysteries as the backdrop. Now, all 8 novels in the Red Wing Saga, a $160 value, can be yours for just $110, a savings of $50. You'll also find the Derek Gilbert collection, all 5 of my nonfiction books, a $100 value for just $70. Those are just 2 of the special offers available through January at our online store. You'll find it at gilberthouse.org/store. And as always, we thank you for your prayers and your support. Ancient Sodom is a real place. By the time you watch or listen to this program, a team is on its way to the Kingdom of Jordan to begin the 16th and final excavation season at the site of ancient Sodom. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. This week, we're bringing an interview that we recorded at the International Symposium on Archaeology and the Bible back in August. This was hosted by Trinity Southwest University, where a team led by Dr. Stephen Collins has been excavating in Jordan for 15 seasons to this point. Of course, the dig seasons were interrupted by COVID-19 over the last few years, but they are returning beginning this coming week for the final season of excavations at a site called Tal El Hammam. This is across the river from Jordan. It is northeast of the Dead Sea, and they've accumulated scientific evidence that has been published in a peer-reviewed journal, an imprint of Nature magazine, which is a secular peer-reviewed journal that's caused quite a bit of stir. Secularists who don't want to believe that this could possibly be real. It's just a bunch of Bible believers trying to prove that Scripture is real. And other Christians, and on the other hand, Christians who don't want to believe that the location of Sodom is northeast of the Dead Sea rather than southeast or southwest or a number of other places that have been proposed for the traditional site. The scientific evidence compiled by this team has convinced me. And over the next 3 weeks, we'll give you a couple of interviews with key members of the team. This week, the interview that we recorded in Albuquerque this past fall at the International Symposium Archaeology and the Bible with the author of the book Finding Sodom and the leader of the dig team at Tal El Hammam, Dr. Stephen Collins. We're here in the hospitality suite at the International Symposium for Archaeology and the Bible. Dr. Collins, we really appreciate you putting this together. First, why did you bring back this conference? This is the second year that it's been back after a hiatus of some years.
Yeah, almost 15 years. It was a long time. Well, we used to do it in the wintertime because January was the deadest month of the year after the holidays, and so we used to have it then, back from 2001 to 2005, I believe. And it just so happens that in 2005, we also started the Tal El Hammam excavation. And which had to be in that winter framework, because the Jordan Valley, where the excavation is located, is way too hot. Any other time of the year,
We've been there in May. We can attest to that.
So it's pretty warm. So we just had to sacrifice the symposium, and we didn't realize it was going to disappear for that many years, but we were just so busy, and so. We've done 15 seasons at the Tal El Hammam site since then, since we laid it down. But then, by 15 seasons, you kind of figure things out. It's not as intense and overwhelming as it used to be. Since all of our equipment and all my clothes and all of everything we need for the dig is in Jordan already, it stays there. So life got a little bit easier, and we decided, and we originally did the symposium because we wanted our students to interact with the best scholars in the world of archaeology and biblical archaeology. So, but we thought, we got to bring all these people in. Why don't we open it to the public and charge some money so we can help defray the expenses of the symposium? So we did that, and now we're back. So we decided last year we're going to do it. In fact, it was Gary Byers, my assistant director at Tal Hammam Dig, who said, we really ought to bring that back for our students. We really need to do that again. So we decided to do it. We had a really good symposium last fall in last September. And then we asked everybody to raise their hand last year.
Yeah.
If we do it next year, will you come back? Of course, just about everybody raised their hand. Well, everybody was expecting it to be in September. But after COVID, all the hotels got greedy, I think, and they decided to raise their prices way up to sort of make up for lost time. And September was the high season here in Albuquerque, but August still was kind of lagging at the end of the low season because kids are going back to school, people aren't traveling as much. So we decided, we just can't do it in September. It's just too expensive, and we can't. You can only charge so much for a symposium or a conference. So we decided we'll do it in August, and I think we lost quite a few people, but we still have a good group this year, but not as many as last year.
Yeah, we're among those who raised our hands, and we're happy to be back.
Well, we're glad you're back because some people raised their hands and
couldn't make it.
They wind up not being able to make it.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about some of the subjects covered here, but I want to just touch for a bit on the work that you've been doing at Tal El Hammam. We were made aware of it a few years back when it first attracted some news after Dr. Philip Sylvia, your director of scientific analysis there, presented at a conference in the fall of 2018, I believe. Perfect timing for us because then in the spring of 2019, from Mount Nebo, we were able to point to that little hill extending into the Jordan Valley and say, look, there it is. What was it that made you look at that site, overlooking the Jordan River, the plains of Moab, as a potential dig site?
Well, the site of Sodom and the cities of the plain, of course, had long been controversial. Babadra and Numeira and some other sites near the south end of the Dead Sea had always been more or less lumped together as the traditional cities of the plain. There were some severe problems with that I was particularly unaware of. And other scholars had to do a lot of bending and massaging of the historical record to make that happen. But I was even on a TV documentary back in the early 1990s talking about Babadra and the location at the south end of the Dead Sea as Sodom and all of that. So, I was just going along with the conventional wisdom at the time. And then about 1996, I was leading a tour, and we were going to include Jordan. And so we had gone all the way through Israel. We're way down at Eilat, and we're going to cross over to Aqaba, and we're going to come back up and go to eventually go to Petra, and then go over to Babadra, Sodom. So I had that on my itinerary. So at the hotel over in Israel before we crossed over, I got the Bible out just to kind of read and brush up on it. And as I read through it, I got to the end of it, and I thought, wait a minute. I didn't see anything in there that would locate Sodom toward the south into the Dead Sea. And so I read it again. 2 or 3 more times that night, so at least 4 times. And when I got through, I said, not only is there nothing in the entire stretch of the Sodom narratives that would locate Sodom toward the south end of the Dead Sea, every indicator I see in there would locate it north and east of the Dead Sea. And because the Bible was very clear that Lot looked down and saw the cities of the plain, saw the Kikar, the circle of the Jordan, and the cities of the Kikar, and that he traveled there from well north of Jerusalem above Jericho in the highlands at Bethel and Ai, where Lot and Abraham were stationed at the time. It says he lifted up his eyes from that location and then traveled eastward and pitched his tent as far as Sodom. Well, everything about that, and the Bible clearly said that the Jordan, and these were the cities of the Kikar, of the Jordan, and the Bible is very clear that the Jordan River, the descending, which Jordan means descending of the fresh water, ends at the Bay of the Dead Sea, at the mouth of the Jordan, below Pisgah, which is Nebo. Well, that's all north of the Dead Sea. So it's pretty clear if you know all the geography. And so I thought, that bugs me. I've been taking people to the wrong site, and so is everybody else. So what are we going to do about this? Well, nothing actually, because that very year we started our excavation with Gary and I and Bryant Wood and others up at Kermit El Makadr, which was also about 12 miles north of Jerusalem, up in the highlands, not far from Bethel and I. So I just kind of logged it in the back of my head. It bothered me that so many people had flipped the geography upside down, but I didn't have time to do anything about it because we were just starting an excavation. I didn't need a project, didn't need a study to do. So I laid it down. Well, about 6 years later, about 2000, got a little dicey in the West Bank, as you recall. And, we had going back and forth to the dig. We had a few rocks thrown at the bus and things like that. And so we decided to shut the dig down, at least temporarily. And so after that, in the winter of 2000, 2001, now, as an archaeologist, I'm thinking, we don't have a project to go to. We just shut the dig down. What are we going to do? So I thought, that Sodom conundrum, I've got to dive into that. So I purposefully, a lot of times when I do these kinds of research, I don't really want to see what other people think. Don't care. Because it seemed like in this case, especially, everybody else was wrong. And so I really don't want to listen anymore to what anybody else had to say. I'm going to go back to the Hebrew text, and I'm going to work it word for word, phrase for phrase, sentence for sentence, and let's see what it really says, and let's see what it doesn't say. And so I did that. And in fact, what I did was I put in, because I knew if I didn't put in to read a paper, at least at NEAS, Near East Archaeological Society meeting in the fall, I probably would find reasons to put it off. But I put in for that paper, so I was on the docket to present some kind of
stress is a powerful motivator.
Some kind of a paper. So I dove into that research, and it got longer and longer and longer and longer. It actually went beyond a paper and became a small book, and we called it The Search for Sodom and Gomorrah. But it was just basically my exegesis of the biblical text and what the text said, and it was very clear that Sodom was north and east of the Dead Sea. In fact, it was very clear that it was the largest, the Bible presents it as the largest Bronze Age city north and east of the Dead Sea in an area visible from Bethel and Ai.
Something worth kings coming all the way from Mesopotamia and crossing the desert, crossing through Tadmor, Damascus, coming down from the north and doing battle with these kings.
No, exactly right. And not only that, if you go back to Genesis 10, the cities of the plain are mentioned parallel, right alongside with the great cities of Mesopotamia. And so when it's talking about the extent of the Canaanites, it said the Canaanites lived along the coast, and it brings us down from Sidon to Gerar, to Gaza, to Gerar, and then it jumps over to the valley. It says then from Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim to Elisha, which is Laish in the north. So it's going south to north. In fact, it was brought up in the conference just a little while ago that the Transjordan cities, from an Egyptian point of view on the Egyptian map lists, are always listed from south to north as you come from Egypt. And that's exactly the way they're listed in the book of Genesis. So we decided Sodom was the southernmost city because it's Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, so on. But it's always mentioned first in the list. Whether it's just mention Sodom, Gomorrah, or Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other cities, it's always listed first. It's the only one ever mentioned by itself.
Giving it some, indicating that it was really important.
Right. And the king of Sodom is the only one that plays in the story. He's the only one that has a voice. So it seemed that was a reasonable assessment that Sodom was big. It was the biggest one of those cities anyway. So if you could find the biggest Bronze Age city north and east of the Dead Sea, in the immediate vicinity of the southern Jordan Valley, you probably have Sodom.
Just to give viewers a sense of how important it is, because in the biblical narrative, we would assume Jericho plays a much bigger role because that's where where Joshua focuses his efforts when they first cross the river. But in the time of Abraham, how big was Sodom, Tal El Hammam, compared to Jericho and, say, Jerusalem?
Well, you could probably put 7 or 8 Jerusalems, maybe 10 of them, inside the fortifications at Tal El Hammam.
That much bigger.
And we used to think that you could fit that many Jerichos in there too. We now know that Jericho has a lower city, so it may be much bigger than everybody used to think it was in the Middle Bronze Age in the time of Abraham. But it's still, Tal El Hammam is much larger than Jericho. So it's the biggest city. In fact, we now know it as the largest continuously occupied, not largest city, but largest continuously occupied Bronze Age city in the entire southern Levant. Now, there's only one in southern Levant. There's only really one city, maybe 2, that got bigger: Ashkelon on the coast and Hatzor in the Upper Galilee. So, but we always say we have more satellites. They crammed all their people into 2 big towns, into the big towns, but we have dozens of satellites around us. We have guardian cities around us, plus the other cities of the plain, all in a very tight, within a 6-7 kilometer radius of a center. So it's pretty packed in with sites.
Previously, we've had the opportunity to interview Dr. Sylvia, so he's kind of laid out the scientific evidence. I'm kind of curious, though, as the director of archaeology there at Tal El Hammam, what was your feeling when you began to get a sense of the size of the city on that hill?
Well, that sense of the size of it was evident because we've been working in Israel for a while. I've been to every major every major ancient city in Israel and Jordan. So I have a sense of the size of these things. And so when we first drove up to Tal El Hammam, I couldn't believe how big it was. And I understood why a lot of people missed it, because it doesn't look like your average tell. It looks like just part of the landscape, and you don't realize that this hill is so big, but it's artificially built up over time.
Looks too big to be an artificial man-made construction.
Yeah, and so, in fact, when I first saw it, I didn't even realize at that point I was only looking at the upper city. When we began to excavate and began to explore out and follow the fortifications of the lower city, in fact, one day we were excavating all the way out at the far west tower of the Middle Bronze fortifications. And when you look back to the upper city from there, it's like you're in the next county. It's so far away. We're still in the city, but look how far the upper city is from the lower city. And I've had that same view from Hatzor, standing on the northern fortifications, looking back toward the upper city, and it's the same kind of experience. The thing is huge, and so we got a sense that, wow, this thing is amazing. In fact, the great city of Ebla, during the Intermediate Bronze Age, particularly the early and Intermediate Bronze Age, up in Syria, is always known sort of in the Intermediate Bronze Age, sort of the Queen of the North. It's a big city. It's really kind of a Mesopotamia. It's not in Mesopotamia, but it has a Mesopotamian kind of a posture. And it was interesting to note, we're 72% the size of Ebla. I mean, Ebla's huge, but we're 72% the size of Ebla. That's the fortification. If you spread out to the wadi, and we now know from some ground-penetrating radar surveys that we've had done, that the city goes wadi to wadi. It spreads outside the fortifications.
So there were suburbs, if you will, outside the walls.
So we can easily push it up to 200 meters or more.
Wow.
200, 200 acres. Okay, trying to shift from acres to hectares, or hectares to acres, about 200 acres.
But again, at that time, Jerusalem was about 10, 12 acres, Jericho 10, 12 acres, maybe a little more.
Yeah, small. And little Baba Dra that everybody wants to make into Sodom down on the south end of the Dead Sea is about 12 acres. It's tiny. It's tiny and marginal, and not only that, it was destroyed about 600 years before Abraham was ever born.
And not really a green place where you could pasture flocks.
No, it's marginal.
Yeah.
When the climate shift began to turn around the end of the early Bronze Age, when all the early Bronze Age sites in the southern Levant went down, it went down with them. Mm-hmm. Well, guess which one didn't go down? Tal Hammam didn't go down. Not only that, it remained a powerful city-state. It was the only operating city-state in the southern Levant for about 400 years, from 2500 BC down to about 2100 BC.
With the time we have left, I want to get into a little bit of perhaps speculation. Sharon and I wrote a book a few years ago called Veneration, where we looked at the Rephaim. And of course, when you look at the Rephaim in the Levant, you have to look at the dolmens. And you mentioned in your book, Discovering the City of Sodom, almost in passing, 1,500 dolmens approximately that were at the base of the city. What is your sense as an archaeologist? Because we can speculate. We don't have a PhD to worry about or to the reputation to protect, but we don't want to go beyond the evidence. What do you think those were for, and why were there so many at the base of Sodom?
Well, everybody, every culture has a way of burying their dead or honoring their dead. The typical way to do it is to bury them in a tomb. And scholars had speculated about what a dolmen is. They're upright stones, large upright stones, generally with a capstone. Now there's a type A dolmen and a type B and a type C and a type D dolmen, but they're all essentially a chamber created by upright slabs with a flat slab over the top. In fact, the word dolmen comes from the Britain word for table. Mm-hmm. So the dolmens are interesting. Now in Europe, they are tombs. But in our excavations, and by the way, we're the only team to actually excavate. Nobody else has ever done this. We excavated 3 intact, undisturbed dolmens.
I thought they'd all been robbed out in the Jordan Valley.
No. We have 3 unrobbed, undisturbed, untouched dolmens.
Wow.
And so we haven't published that yet. I mean, it's kind of published. I mean, it's in our excavation reports and all of that. But one of these days we'll publish it. But what we've discovered is that most people's understanding of dolmens is incorrect. Mm-hmm. They are not tombs, not in the southern Levant. They are memorials to the dead. And so what we discovered in the chambers that we excavated was that on some kind of a ritual calendar, the family, and maybe it's probably a family, we think it's a clan that has a tomb or has a dolmen. They also have tombs in the valleys. So on the ritual calendar, where they would go down to the family tomb, grab a bone, take it up, open the dolmen, put 2 or 3 little vessels in there with maybe some olive oil, maybe some grain, and everybody you mentioned 1,500 dolmens. That's what we estimate. Over 1,500 dolmens in this area. Every family on the same night, by torchlight, doing exactly the same thing. Can you imagine such a festival? Mm. Boy, it would be noisy and dancing and tambourines and all kinds of things going on with thousands of people. And they would ceremonially open their dolmen, put these offerings in, ceremonially close the dolmen, and dance and drink all night or whatever they wanted to do. But we found something really stunning. Everybody always used to think that the dolmens were beginning to be built in the late Chalcolithic period around 4000 BC, mm-hmm. and then on into the early Bronze, very popular in the early Bronze 1 period, and then continuing on down and maybe dying out sometime around the end of the early Bronze period. That's what everybody always assumed. But nobody had ever excavated an intact dolmen. Well, in all 3 of our intact dolmens, guess what we found? Middle Bronze Age deposits.
So right in the time of Abraham.
Goes all the way up to the time of Abraham.
Yeah.
So that just it kind of blew our minds, because we didn't see that coming. And in fact, we had 2 dolmens in which we found very specific complete Middle Bronze Age vessels. In the other one, in the big dolmen, and it was really on the large scale, it had about 32 intact vessels in it and a whole lot of broken vessels, because you can imagine if you open and close this vessel ceremonially, eventually this dolmen, eventually it's going to get so full of vessels. What do? Well, it was obvious what they did. They did this.
They pushed them to the back.
They just pushed everything like this and made room for what the next thing is. And we actually found a large stone receptacle, with kind of rectangular down the hill, in which there was all kinds of junk from the dolmens thrown in. So it's kind of like, if you have to empty your dolmen and start all over because there's too much stuff in it, take it down and throw it in that, and keep the space for next year. But Gary and I were in the lab, and I don't know why, but we had taken out a box of the contents of this large dolmen. Now, all the whole pottery is still in Jordan, but some of the smaller stuff, the broken pieces, were there. And we've identified in the Middle Bronze Age for Abraham, we have identified a very elaborate and distinctive pottery we call multi-slipped palaceware. In fact, it has a really long title, multi-slipped cross-wiped palaceware. And it's nobody has ever seen anything like it. No, we've passed this around to so many archaeologists who know the Middle Bronze material. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. It's unique.
So unique to Sodom.
It's unique. It seems unique to Ptolemy. And so it's very easy to recognize it. And we're just looking at this box of pottery, of bags of stuff that came from the dolmen, broken stuff that came from the dolmen. And in one of the bags, we opened it up and go, whoa, this is palaceware. This is Middle Bronze palaceware. It's in the dolmen chamber. So now, whether that was a whole vessel at one point, or whether they just took a broken piece as a gesture and took it up and deposited it. But now every chamber that we looked at has a connection to the Middle Bronze Age.
Wow.
Now to me, that's really exciting. Ethnographically or anthropologically, it's really exciting, because here we can track the religious concept or idea of use of a dolmen, continuous, same people, same family, same ethnic group, probably same language, same religion, over about 2,500 years. Non-stop.
From the beginning of the Chalcolithic, around 4000 BC, down to its destruction.
Yeah.
That's...
Well, at the end of the Chalcolithic. So,
yeah.
So around from 4000 BC down to about 1700 BC, you have this... The religion is the same.
That is astonishing.
Yeah, it really is.
Because the scale of time, that's like from Nebuchadnezzar destroying the temple to us having this conversation.
No, exactly right.
Wow. Just the few minutes we've got left, because we know that for some reason we've got children who enjoy this show, parents and grandparents whose kids like watching a couple of old people talk about science. God bless you. What would you say to kids thinking about archaeology and how cool it is? What would you encourage them to study or do? How would they go about becoming an archaeologist?
Let me back into it from the other end. I have had so many people come to us over the years and say, I want to get into an archaeology degree program. I want to study archaeology and become an archaeologist. And what they tell us is, I'm an engineer. I've had a whole career as an engineer. I've had our career as a doctor or whatever else. And they say, but when I was a kid, when I was in third grade, I wanted to be an archaeologist. And my parents talked me out of it. They said, why don't you study something that you can actually make some money doing? And then later on, if you still want to do that, make yourself a nest egg. And if you later want to do that, then do it. But, archaeology doesn't pay. And I always tell them, well, be glad you listened to your parents. Because our archaeology is not something, in fact, every archaeologist that I know that works in the field, we have to fundraise to do it. I mean, nobody's just giving us money to go do it. That's a pretty rare thing. And so fundraising is always difficult, or you got to have a day job, teach in a university, teach history. And a lot of the guys that I know that do archaeology teach theology, or they teach biblical studies in a seminary, or they teach history at a university. But there are very few of us actually get to teach archaeology. And so, and even some of the big schools, some of the seminaries are shutting down their archaeology programs. They really don't see the significance of it. They don't see the value of it, especially in terms of biblical studies.
Wow.
Which is really sad.
Yes.
Because I think archaeology is the cutting edge of demonstrating the historical accuracy of the Bible and the historical value of the biblical texts. So, I would say to anybody wanting to come up, if you come from a wealthy family, great, do it. But otherwise, along with becoming an archaeologist, do some fundraising and grant writing training.
Yeah.
But, really.
Yeah.
Because if you decide that you want to do all of this study, which is going to be expensive anyway, then you're going to go, and if you want to go and do archaeology, you've got to have the money to do it.
Maybe that's the thing for churches out there who are excited about the discoveries that are coming out of Tal El Hammam, but also Shiloh and the work at Joshua's altar here recently, Mount Ebal. Maybe this is a mission field for churches to sponsor students who want to go into this field. Before we close, how can people support your work in the archaeology programs at Veritas International and Trinity Southwest?
Well, it's pretty easy. You can go to digsodom.com. I could say talelhammam.com, but nobody can spell it. So we also have digsodom.com. Takes you to our website. You can link up to making a donation from there. I would also say that people can get on our email newsletter list, and they could do that really easy by just simply text the phrase, all one word, Dig Sodom. Just no caps, just DIGSODOM. Dig Sodom, and text that on your phone to the number 22828.
Brilliant.
So dial 22828, text, put Dig Sodom in there, send it. It'll give you an instruction to put your email address in there, and then from that time forward, you'll be getting our updates. And from that update, there are all the links to, like, the excavation, becoming an excavation volunteer, donating to the excavation by a number of means. So that's the way to do it.
And you can volunteer on the Dig site at Tal El Hammam, be part of discovering ancient Sodom, and find out more. Sharon and I are here because we're on the mailing list, and we really appreciate your work and your time today, Dr. Collins.
Thank you so much for having me. Enjoyed it.
You can follow their work at the website for the Tal El Hammam excavation project. That's talelhammam.com, or easier to remember, digsodom.com. All one word, digsodom.com. Again, this will be their final season, as I understand it. The Kingdom of Jordan and the Department of Antiquities of the Kingdom there plans to turn the site into an archaeological site for tourists. And I say, God bless them. Sharon and I were actually hoping that there'd be at least one more dig season so we could volunteer to be part of the team, but that's not going to happen. But if we can lead people there on future tours of Israel and Jordan, we will be happy with that. This, in my mind, is one of the most significant archaeological finds of the last century, if not ever. And we just want to share the excitement that we have with this find with you. Again, coming up in a couple of weeks, bring you an interview recorded last year with Dr. Philip Sylvia. We did a Skype interview, and he is the director of scientific analysis for The Dig, the co-author of the paper that was published by the imprint of Nature that attracted so much attention and generated so much controversy. Many of the attacks are ad hominem. They're not really going after the science. They're going after the writers of the paper because, well, they're Christians, so it can't be true. Christians can't be scientists. This can't be real. The Bible's all made up. Well, sorry, but the scientific evidence suggests that there was a cataclysmic event that took place just where the Bible places it, if you read the clues in the book of Genesis carefully, sometime in the Middle Bronze Age, which is where we would find Abraham and Lot. So, once again, even though we may, and this is one of the other objections people have, and I admit I struggle with this a little bit too, because I've got my own timeline in my head as to where I think where Abraham and Lot are to be found, but the evidence points to something slightly different. So maybe the carbon-14 isn't as precise as we would like. Maybe our charts and spreadsheets need to be adjusted a little bit. But the bottom line is when you look at the Bible and you look at the archaeological record, the record found in the ground confirms the narrative, the flow of history, even if it doesn't match up exactly with what we think the dates are supposed to be. So maybe instead of, being like the inebriated man looking for his car keys under the streetlight because the light is better there, we go where the evidence leads us and draw our conclusions there. But the bottom line, again, is that the narrative of the Bible is confirmed by the archaeological record. And with what they've already discovered at Tal El Hammam, Dr. Collins and his team will have years and years of papers to publish with all of the information that they found. One of the things that we find most interesting, something he shared with us during a private conversation at that conference, is that much of the pottery that they found seems to match that from the Minoan civilization from the island of Crete. And that is really interesting. Again, it just shows that there was more cross-cultural contact between the Holy Land, the Levant, Canaan, if you will, and the Aegean, the civilizations of the Greeks and the Proto-Greeks. So much richer history in the Bible than most of us assume. We tend to put the Israelites in a little silo and isolate them from their neighbors, but that just was not the case. Well, next week, Iron and Myth, another session with our good friends, Dr. Judd Burton, Pastor Doug Van Dorn, and Brian Godow. We'll be talking about the hierarchy of the spirit realm. That should be really, really interesting because, frankly, it's very speculative. We really don't know from the biblical texts where the various classes of angels fall. Please follow us on social media. You'll find us on Twitter at View from Bunker or at Derek Gilbert, Facebook View from the Bunker, and you'll find us also on all the new social media sites, Truth Social, Gab Me, We Get Her Parlor, Derek P. Gilbert. And please take advantage of our free app. The app is available for mobile devices and also for Roku and Apple TV, so you can put these video programs on the big screen with no difficulty whatsoever. The content is hosted by a Christian company, so if we happen to say something at some point about something that somebody somewhere doesn't like, we're not going to get canceled if you've got our app, because we're not playing, say, in a playground owned by Google or Amazon or something like that. So do get our app. You'll find the link at gilberthouse.org/app, gilberthouse.org/app. There's also a link at VFTB.net in the top menu bar there. And we got links to the app stores for the device that you have so that you can download that app and take advantage of it. The mobile app's advantage is that it's got a Bible. It's got a Bible module and an audio Bible with multiple translations, so you can listen to Scripture while you're there. And then do check out the More tab there. It's got links to all of our other stuff. It's makes us look a lot bigger than we really are, because this whole ministry is really just Sharon and me, and you, frankly, for your prayers and your support. Coming up, we've got a couple of things to tell you about the advanced supernatural warfare training that we participated in back in October in Jeffersonville, Indiana. The team at Hear the Watchman Ministries, Mike Kerr, Jeannie Moore, they have produced, along with great help from Jim and Crystal Woodcock, have put together the training manuals compiled from those presentations. So if you weren't able to attend the conference, you can now purchase as a package the videos of the presentations plus outlines, printed outlines to use as a Bible study A really valuable tool. You get more information online at hearthewatchman.com. I also know that we've got a virtual conference coming up very soon from Hear the Watchman. I know because I've agreed to produce a video presentation for them, so we'll have more information on that very soon. Skywatch TV's virtual conference continues, Exposing the Darkness. So you can sign up through February 4th, get 90 days access to all the presentations, plus the 6 feature-length documentary films from Skywatch Films. This all includes my presentation, Exposing the Valley of the Shadow of Death. Why did Jesus base his ministry at the North Shore on the Sea of Galilee? There's a reason that he chose that place. And there will be a spring virtual conference coming from Skywatch TV. More details on that coming as they become available. If you're interested in joining us in Israel, do act quickly. We were nearly full in that third bus. We've got a third bus now, so we're getting close to about 120 people on the tour, which is a good number, because we'll have 3 50-person buses with about 40 each on each bus, and that is getting close. So if you're interested, you want to get in contact with Lipkin Tours as soon as possible. Customer@lipkintours.com is their email address, customer@lipkintours.com, or just look for information at our website, gilberthouse.org/travel. There's a link that will take you right to the Lipkin Tours website. So even though they would like to have had a complete number to this point, just to make sure they've got enough hotel rooms blocked out, if you're coming in at the last minute, they're really good about finding a way to make it work. So if you're interested in joining us March 19th through 30th with an optional 3-day extension in Jordan, where we will show you from Mount Nebo, the site that we were talking about today, Tal El Hammam, ancient Sodom, please do. It will be a blessing. And we are still working on details for a potential tour of Turkey this coming October. We'll tell you more about that as that information becomes available. Also, the Go Therefore conference. We've just heard from Mike Spalding, Pastor Mike Spalding, Dr. Mike Spalding of the Transforming Word Ministries. They put on the Go Therefore conference, which Sharon and I thoroughly enjoyed this past summer, and they're doing it again, July 28th through 30th of 2023. This will be in the Dayton area, the Harvest Revival Center in Brookline, Ohio. No information yet as far as other speakers so far, but we have confirmed that we will be there for that. So we'll tell you more, and we hope that we can see you there. That was a great conference this past summer, and we're looking forward to doing that again. If you get a spare moment, you can leave us a review. We'd sure appreciate it. We're at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and wherever fine podcasts are sold. If you're watching on YouTube, God bless you. Click the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. But please, again, get our free app. Our announcer is D.C. Good. Yes, he's a real guy, and he really exists. Professional voiceover guy. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We do this because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.